My name is Pinson, Roxburgh. I'm the Managing Director for Bulletproof, and I spend quite a lot of my days these days contemplating where we're all going wrong from a security standpoint, because I get asked by a lot of organisations what can we do to make ourselves more secure, what should we be considering from a technology's point of view, what are the best practices, how do I meet certain compliance requirements. And at Bulletproof, we do a lot of different things. We sort of help organisations across a broad set of different services and technologies. So while I'm thinking about that, I'm thinking how's the best way to demonstrate this to organisations, what they should be thinking about. And so one of the things I've realised is that we should be looking back at the things that we've seen happen in cybersecurity over the years and thinking, has anything changed and how has it adapted? So there's a few things that I'm going to talk about in this presentation. Some is the most recent trends that we've seen. I'm going to go back in time to look at some of the early activities that we saw from a security standpoint. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how we got hacked, which should be interesting. I'll try not to fidget while I'm grenades, but if you want a grenade, come and see me at the stand afterwards. Okay, so the question I keep asking myself is, in my 15 years of experience, working in the OT security industry, what really has changed from a hacking perspective? What have we seen that's different? What are the attackers doing differently? How have they evolved over time? Have they evolved over time? What really has changed? Now, I'm not talking small evolutions like when they create a new piece of a new virus or a new piece of malware, just changing it slightly to get past certain security controls. I'm talking significant changes in their approach. Now, if we think about significant changes in the approach to security, that's where you can really look to enforce different security controls and think differently about how we do security. So that's what I'm really focusing on. So let's start way back in 1971. In 1971, this was the first virus that was really hit ARPANET, which is basically a guy who decided he wanted to figure out if there was a way to do something that would lead to self-replication. So could a virus self-replicate in the ARPANET? It was called the Creeper, and its tagline was "Catch me if you can." So the idea was just to try and find as many assets as possible and compromise as many systems as possible. That's all it did. It didn't do anything really malicious, it just was trying to prove a point. If we fast forward a couple of years, this one has a particular interest for myself really, because this was early in my career. This was one of the biggest security challenges people faced. It was something that was really well known. It was called the I love you bug. And the idea was that they were playing on people's emotions, right? It was more about social engineering. The idea was they'd send an email that said, I love you, and the idea was it was a love letter. You'd have to click this love letter, and of course what it would do is execute a load of code and do a load of bad things. One of the things it also did, surprise, surprise, is it looked at your address book, and it sent the email to everybody in your address book as well, which was, again, similar to the let's go and spread this thing and see how far and wide it goes. The concept here was to spread through email, and it was really good at it. And actually, the reason why it was that good at it, it led to whole new security products. There was a whole new approach to dealing with email security, and there was a whole load of technologies that built at the back of that. Email filtering products that allows you to block this stuff. And early in my career, I was getting involved in this. I was going to customers, and they still were getting this, and we were still having to block it and finding new ways to block this sort of attack. Now, you'll see also there's something really interesting here. It looks like they were trying to get around certain security technologies by just renaming the file to make it slightly different. So in here it says it looks like it's a text file, but it's actually a script. Now the other thing I really love about it is if you read the code, it says, I hate go to school. So they clearly didn't like doing their schoolwork, and it was a Philippines group that came up with this technology. And if you read about it now, actually everyone looks at the code and says it was awful. It was terrible bit of coding, it was really hashed together, and it wasn't particularly great in the way they did it. But that was kind of one of the early stages of where we really saw technology having to evolve to address the security challenge we hadn't seen before. So let's take note of a few things before we get started in more of the kind of recent history of activity that's going on. A lot of these things were self-propagating, so finding a way in which to get to as many systems as possible, as many people as possible. The next thing was that it had to be a simple delivery method. If you expect somebody non-technical to do anything with any sort of virus or piece of malware, it's got to be really easy because they're not experts in technology. They're not going to go and run and install a program and study. You have to be able to just double click it and just do what it needs to do. And most of the time, it's just for fun. It wasn't anything malicious. So if we fast forward a few years to kind of more recent times, now we've got loads of security products. A lot of the time we're focusing on security logs from different security tools to help us address the problem. It gets really complicated really fast, it gets really complex. And now hackers want to make money. They're trying to monetize their attacks. It's not about fun so much anymore. It's more about either making a statement or making some money. So you see I put some stickers on the hacker's laptop. One of them is Monero, which is a cryptocurrency, and the other one is Bitcoin, which is another cryptocurrency. Now the reason why I'm talking about cryptocurrency will become clear in a moment. The first thing, to make sure everyone understands this, no the geeks in the room or the techies in the room are going to stand around and say, I already know this, why is he telling me about JavaScript? For those of you who are non-technical, there's some client-side code that runs in your browser. Basically what happens is it runs little programs inside of your web browser. And what it's doing is it's using the local CPU and local compute of your browser itself. And it's important to note this at the moment because one of the things that we see quite a lot at the moment is something called cryptocurrency mining. And the attackers have cottoned onto this so they can make a bit of money. And one of the things they've come up with is a piece of code that runs in your browser that doesn't need you to install anything. It doesn't now need you to download the blockchain, which is all of the hashes it has to compare to see if you've got a cryptocurrency hash. It just runs in your browser. So we did a bit of research and we thought, well actually let's go and have a look at how many of these we can find. And there's actually one tool at the moment which is a really cool name, it's called Nerdy Data, for all the people that like strange geeky sites. But basically it can look for code in websites. So I did a quick search and I found that there's something called DeepMiner, which is a bit of JavaScript code which runs in your browser and it mines cryptocurrency using your browser to do that work. So it's basically using your local CPU to process the cryptocurrency. And you see one here, I've highlighted in particular, there's about 26 on this page, but there's many, many more I'm sure. This one looks like WNBC.com. It's got a nice logo like WNBC.com, the domain name looks very much like WNBC.com. When you go to the website, it looks like a normal Apache page, but in the bottom you'll see this little script down the bottom here, which says duckdns.org, and it's got deepminer.js. So basically what happens is when you go to this page, the site is actually mining cryptocurrency using your browser. So I thought, well, this is actually quite an interesting thing because we're seeing this actually in attacks as well. So when an attacker compromises a web server, that what they used to do was install a web shell and then try and steal database information, steal credit cards, PII, other bits of information. They don't want to do that anymore because this kind of concept of smash and grab, where you just go in and you steal those data. You've got to sell it. How do you sell it? You've got to go to the dark web, you've got to go through the process of finding a way to sell it. It's quite cheap, you can find loads of stuff on the dark web, really low cost. And so a few credentials or credit cards are not going to make you a great deal of money. So maybe this new concept of actually just installing cryptocurrency miners everywhere is going to make me cash rich. And actually the cryptocurrency has kind of gone from costing almost nothing to obviously now being really expensive. So they've taken that evolution, they have actually evolved their approach. They're no longer looking at stealing data, they're trying to be as stealthy as possible to install code that can make the money that way. So I thought, well okay, let me go and put this onto a well-known site called VirusTotal. That allows me to check to see if this has seemed to be malicious in the past by any other systems. And 1 in 70 AV vendors, the only one that actually picked it up was Kaspersky, that said it was a miner. Nobody else knew that this was anything malicious. So I started thinking, actually, is it really malicious? So if you start reading about blogs about this sort of thing, some people are saying, actually, I'd rather have a cryptocurrency miner mine in my browser without me really knowing, as long as it doesn't have an impact on my machine, then I wouldn't actually see an ad. So that got us thinking, how much money can you actually make if you hacked a server and you put one of these miners on? I'm going to make a note of something called CoinHive. This is another one that's really important. I'll explain why CoinHive is important in a moment. DeepMiner we've seen a bit about, we're also seeing CoinHive. They're all using, well, they're mostly using Monero, because Monero is super easy to do the cryptocurrency with. Like I said, it's just one little bit of code and it will mine Monero. So we did some calculations. So we reckon that roughly each browser does around 25 hashes per second, which is actually quite low. If you were YouTube and you picked the top video for the last year, just the last year, it receives about 5.58 billion views. So we reckon that per view, it roughly works out that this video is 3 minutes 47 long. So maybe not everyone stays on the video for the whole period of time, but let's say on average, most of them will stick to the full video. And actually, I don't know if you guys are seeing the same thing, but in organisations I go and see now, most people are just running YouTube in the background to play music and stuff, so it's pretty much on all day. So if you think about cryptocurrency mining, the the problem you've got is that if you put that link on, and that website only gets a few views a day, and it's only a couple of seconds, you don't make very much money. If somebody's on it all day, you've got the whole day where somebody's doing cryptocurrency mining at 25 hashes per second. So if they're on that video for 3 minutes 47, it's around 6,925 hashes per view. So 5 billion, doing the calculations, rounds up to this number, which I'm not even going to try and say how much that is, but it's a lot, which we reckon is about £287,000 for one video over a year. So that's quite a lot of money. So I was thinking, actually, how much money do they make in ads? You can see that I got a little bit passionate about this. And I went and saw another blog where a guy said he has a site which has about 11,000 users and it creates around 150 to 450 hashes per second, which only actually makes him 89 cents over 2 days. So the reality, it was over 60 hours, whatever it was now. In reality, are you really going to make that much money? And he actually said that he gets 4 to 5 times that per ads by doing ads on the site. But if you're a hacker, it's free money, right? You hack a site, you're very opportunistic, find any site I can hack, drop this little bit of code in it, move on to the next thing. You can pretty much automate all that anyway, and it's just getting money coming all the time, rolling in, and it's just making cryptocurrency. But that isn't the only way they do it. So the first thing is I can hack this site, chuck this code in, pretty simple, pretty straightforward. What we are seeing now, most recently, is a few new bits of malware hitting the security industry. So this comes through ARPANET threat intelligence feed. It's called LordX. We don't really know how this delivered at the moment. There's probably the typical methods of delivery. So these are relatively similar to what we've seen already. Send you a quick email, try and get you to go to a website which is maybe well known or well linked to, and the idea is that you then download this piece of malicious code, you install it on your machine inadvertently without knowing, and guess what it has as a feature? It has a feature of doing cryptocurrency mining. The other thing it does is it infects removable disks. So when you put a removable disk into it, it tries to infect that machine to then take it onto the next machine, check the next machine, the next machine. So now, getting back to the kind of concept of the talk, we're thinking about that very early stage pieces of viruses and different types of malicious code, about propagation, about getting more and more systems into the loop. And they're kind of teeing themselves up for a win now, because of course if you're trying to do mass propagation and you're installing cryptocurrency miners on a mass scale, you've now potentially got one site that's doing 11,000, you could have hundreds of sites doing 11,000 with 11,000 viewers, and you could be actually doing cryptocurrency on a fair few days. Now the interesting thing about this stuff is that it will be able to use as much CPU as possible, which is interesting because the next piece of malicious software that we're seeing is this Trojan that targets Linux machines, and it actually takes up 100% of your CPU utilization. So it takes up the full resources of the computer to do cryptocurrency mining. The problem is you have no idea why, because the Trojan itself hides that process. So you couldn't even tell if it was cryptocurrency mining, because it's 400% stealing all of your resources on your computer. You have no idea that it's doing that. Whereas in the other version, you might be able to see something strange about your browser. It's a bit slow, it's taking up a lot of resources, it's doing some weird things. The other part to this as well, which I mentioned a little bit later on, is that as our organisations today, we're starting to look at agility and cloud and speed and all these sorts of things, and new technologies are coming to the foreground, like Docker and containers. We're all trying it out. The problem is we're all trying it out without a great deal of knowledge of how to set this thing up, and the attackers have realised that, and now they're trying to target the current versions of Docker community versions, which are the free versions, and they're trying to find them on the internet. They're compromising them, and then spinning up thousands of servers with your compute, or if you're in AWS or Azure or one of the other big cloud vendors, they're starting to steal extra resources and spending you more money to scale out your environment to do cryptocurrency. So that's kind of how they're making the money. And of course, with all of this, none of this costs them any money because it's not their equipment and not their systems. It's just time and effort to get there. Don't need to sell anything on the dark web. Don't need to get rid of any credit cards. Don't need to find a way to monetize credit cards. Just run some software on a machine that you don't own and make some money. Two other versions, and these are literally in the last couple of weeks. We've seen these 4 different versions of systems coming out there. So, how are hackers making money outside of this? They're not just doing cryptocurrency, but a good point of this is that the miners for us is really, we're seeing as top of the list. A lot of activity in this space, but CoinHive alone, for them, generates $250,000 per month, dollars per month. So they say. There's different articles that say actually they don't make very much money at all, and some breaches that they say that over a 24-hour period they only made $24. Is it really worth all the effort? But that makes up 1.18% of the Monero network. So Monero is huge, right? But the CoinHive, which is the one that's putting the code into your websites that can then mine the systems, actually makes up quite a big part of their money they make. The other ways in which to do it is that you compromise these systems and then you sell it back to the hacker community. So hackers can use your systems you compromised to do their dirty work if they want to. And also do things like DDoS. I mean, DDoS has slowed down a little bit, got a bit quiet, but still it's out there. We're still seeing activity in our customers actually where they get hit every now and again with DDoS, and we have mitigation solutions that protect against it. The other thing that I haven't put too much emphasis on is ransomware. And now a couple of years ago, that was massive, right? We were all seeing ransomware everywhere. It's kind of died off because it's quite, it's one of those things where you're trying to force somebody to give you money, and we just got wise to it and said, you know what, we'll just back everything up and just rebuild them. We don't really care about doing that anymore. Whereas with cryptocurrency mining, you can do it in the background, you don't even know, and it could be for months. And of course, there's still the concept of stealing data, people's credentials, social information that you can use either in an attack or sell it on to other people for an attack. Or, of course, we're seeing a lot of database breaches at the moment where organisations get breached, like marketing sites, and they have all your credentials, your details, the information you've used to log in. There's been some campaigns around that as well. So again, method of doing it, essentially spamming a load of people, saying, I know what your password was for your last account, I've hacked you, if you don't want to lose more data, you have to pay me some money, and they try and distort them that way. They don't have any access to your system, they're just trying to use the credentials they found on these compromised sites against you. And we've seen quite a bit of that. So we took our data, and this will be a massive march-up, you go to the back, and we looked at the offensive side of the defense. So we do pen testing, so we looked at all the results of our pen tests, and we pulled together the data from those. And we also looked at the defense, so we help organizations monitor everywhere, which is proactive monitoring. And what you'll see is that a large proportion of the stuff we see, okay, still email-based attacks, trying to compromise people's systems through email. Things like CFO fraud is quite common as well. And then down here, you also see application attacks. So we can't ignore that applications are still a big target. We're always building new web applications. Everyone wants a web app or an API that they can use to build their mobile apps to integrate with. So we still see a lot of those being targeted, both from the attackers, and also when we're doing the pen testing, the majority of the findings are related to the applications not being well coded or poor best practices. So they will always be a target, but there are some easier ways in which to target systems, right? Okay, with the initial example I gave, they were hacking websites and putting code in there. There's also the social angle that's still in there as well. But applications are still a big target. And like I said, the Docker bits, the agility stuff, that all comes into play. So we thought, well, let's bait some hackers and find out what they actually do, rather than just sit here assuming that's what they're doing with all the information that we're getting from our intelligence feeds. So we actually decided to bait some hackers, and we've actually removed some of the slides because it was a little bit like, hey, you guys are useless, you can't hack websites. And strangely enough, somebody decided to hack us. So we did a few things. The first thing we found was that we saw scans almost immediately, which is not surprising actually. And I'll show you some actual data that supports that. Again, think about the opportunistic and the propagation bits. You'd expect to put a server online and almost immediately get scanned. Definitely with the Docker stuff. So we've put a couple of Docker machines online, and within like half an hour, somebody's already poking around seeing if they can do something to spin up servers. It's quite funny actually, quite comical. So we've got some data around the scanning bit. We didn't make it too easy. I mean, we didn't want just any old Joe just hitting our server and going, oh, I can hack this, it's easy, I just run a script and it just does it all for me. We didn't want script kiddies. So what we did is we dropped a database backup file on the system, and in it had the user account details. So they could actually get in, but what we found was that we made it a little bit too difficult once they were in. So only the really good guys managed to get past our controls. So they could get into the system, and they had the ability to upload files, which is normally hacker number one. That's the first thing they do. So if you're looking for any proactive monitoring service or things to resolve issues and know what's going on in your environment, the first thing to do is monitor the locations where a hacker might want to drop stuff. So you hack a website, they might want to drop a file into the website so they can do things like manipulate the database or get data out of them. They call them web shells. So if you want to spot that stuff, put file integrity monitoring on your websites and just monitor any file changes, because that's a serious red flag if you see anything happening on those systems. So essentially what happens is they logged in, they tried to upload a file and they couldn't, because we put some blocks in, so you couldn't upload PHP. So PHP is a coding language. Normally they use PHP with these web shells. They couldn't do it. So I had to find a unique way around it. They kept trying and failing, and then one guy figured it out. Basically, all you had to do was change the file extension, kind of like what you saw in the very early stages of the I love you bug, and it got around our controls. They could just put the different name, but it still executed the code and did what they needed to do. But it took them a while to figure that out. They got around that original code and control, and then they were in. Now all through this, I did actually set the task for somebody in the team to just monitor it. We didn't give them any tools. We said, look at the logs and see what happens. And they missed it. They missed it happening because they weren't watching it every day, which is kind of a good simulation because most of us aren't, right? Most of us aren't looking at these logs every single day of the week. Why would you? It's really dry and boring. So we saw attacks from all the obvious areas in the world: South America, Russia. I don't know why. We saw some stuff from China, a load of other places as well, but mostly those topical places. And we also saw some activity from the UK. So we decided, okay, let's trawl through 11,000 logs. That's just from 2 hours worth of activity. This thing was noisy, like really, really noisy. They were really, really noisy. They didn't care that they were being spotted. I think they just got on with it. And this is one of the key things. One of the other talks I do, I talk about, I use Doctor Who as an example. So in Doctor Who, they have these angels of death in it. And one of the things that they do is that when you're not looking, they sort of come up on you, and when you turn around and they see you, they stop. And that's the same thing with logs, right? If you're not watching the logs, you kind of miss the attackers coming up behind you and trying to steal your data. So we looked at the data. So over the period of time, this is from like 7 o'clock, 5 o'clock, something like that. I think the timeline's quite squashed. And it was over a day or two, and then we switched it all off. Essentially, a massive spike of activity from one single IP address, which is important because that changed. And we suspect it changed because they got smart. They went, right, we'll do all the scanning to figure out what's there, the reconnaissance activity with one IP, and we see this also in our customers we're monitoring. One IP seems to be really noisy, and then you see one little IP that's doing very little things in the background, and happens to be the one that's doing all the smart stuff, that's actually taking that data and turning it into the actual hack. So then we saw a change again, another spike in activity, where sort of we could drill down into the data and see a little bit of more of a kind of spike of activity in a one period of time. And we kept seeing these blips. I had an epiphany the other day when I was thinking about this presentation, was that those blips, that's the propagation. So that's the attempts of other things that have been compromised, finding us on the internet, a machine that we've spun up for a day, and they're trying to propagate their hack. They're trying to find another machine to hack. And it's only like 206 events, because what it does is it goes, are you there? Are you vulnerable? I'm not a person, so I'm just going to test to see if I can see if there's anything vulnerable there. If it is, it probably would have hacked us, but because we weren't vulnerable to the thing it was looking for, they could drop its malware onto it. It was too difficult to hack. Moved on to something else. And we saw a couple of cases of that, still roughly the same numbers, so maybe the same stuff happening again, same scripts, same code, just retry again. Can I hack it? No, I can't drop any malware on it, I'll move on to something else. But then this guy got smart, right? So this is the 86 count of events where we whittled it down to a single IP address doing just 86 things, but it looked like this. How do you manage that? And that's why we've got security products, clearly, right? These security products, the idea is that they're supposed to highlight these things and go, oh, bad stuff's happened, you should go and look into it. But you still have to always go back to this and go, what does it actually mean? What's it telling me that I need to do? And don't worry, I'm not doing all this fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and at the end I'm going, good luck, everybody! I'm going to tell you a few hints and tips that we think about. So in here, what he did was, this is the admin page where you can do the uploads. So you can see he figured out how to do the uploads. In here, he tried to actually cat the user password w default, which has all the user information in it. Gathering more information. Can I find another user? Uploaded his web shell, which means that he can run commands against our servers using the rights to have. So down the bottom here, he asked the question, who am I? Do I have enough privileges? And I reckon that if we'd have given a bit more time, he probably would have escalated his privileges and it would have been game over, and he would have taken over our whole system and realised that, in actual fact, this is just a honeypot, and he would be very sorely upset that he can't do anything with it. Aside from maybe do some mining, but for only a small period of time. So this other kind of blip of activity, a couple of months back, there was a virus that came out, there was a vulnerability that came out against D-Link routers. And they're quite widely used, even in the non-commercial space. So average day users, your home broadband connections, might be using these D-Link systems. And we just saw an influx in activity. As soon as that vulnerability came out, the attackers figured out that it's something they can hack. They find scripts to write, and they start trawling the internet for all these systems they might want to compromise. And funnily enough, as we span this server up, the first thing that really hit us was a system that's trying to find this D-Link vulnerability. And of course, we weren't vulnerable to it. But again, a good example of propagation at hand. You can see up here, a couple of these other things in here are just typical tools that are off-the-shelf things that you can download. Arachne and SQL Map, they are the hackers' best friends, and you see them in almost every hack that we monitor. They always try these tools because it's easy to use, they give you good results, and they'll get you into some environments. So typical security weaknesses that we can cover. First and foremost, limited visibility and knowledge. Typically organisations don't have all the logs. We're doing forensics work, and we go and see a customer. The first thing we ask them for is, can we have a look at the logs? Half the time they say we don't have them, they've been deleted, the attacker deleted them maybe, we deleted them because we thought that they needed to rotate. Gaps in how to triage it. So some of the challenges we have is people call us too late. It's like, oh, we've already looked into it and we can't figure out what it is, can you come have a look? What did you do? Have you changed anything? Oh yeah, we patched it all. Oh great, okay, we just ruined our ability to actually find out what happened and how they got in. Lack of a general incident response plan, so the first thing we get is, we're really struggling, we need some help immediately, can you help us out? Already you're under duress, you're struggling, you're panicked, you're going to make bad decisions. So, typically that's some of the main challenges. Also, they've got lots of tools, but they don't really work well together, and it causes this thing called alert fatigue. So you just keep getting noise from these security products, and they don't really mean anything at the end of it. And then if we look at what's happening today, we see agility, clouds, systems are changing, the systems are no longer pets anymore. So back in the day we treated them as pets, like every single server we'd go, right, okay, it needs to be patched, looked after, fed and watered. And then now it's more like cattle, if it doesn't work, we just shoot it and start again. We build a new server in a couple of days. The problem with that is, if it does get tainted or hacked, how do we know? And how do we know if it's just that gold build of system we keep building? We keep building machines that can keep getting hacked, and we just keep perpetuating that same problem over and over again. So this is where traditional security approaches and stuff like that fail and start to struggle. So what do we need? We need tools that are kind of environmental aware, so they know when systems are being spun up and spun down, what images they're using at the time. It needs to be outcome driven, so you don't just keep getting these alerts, somebody's telling you what you've actually got to do with it. It's got to be ultra dynamic, so they have to handle this, which a lot of the traditional security tools aren't. They say, I have a manager I need to talk home to. But if you're always spinning up and down systems, that's going to break. So how can we learn for the future? So this is my kind of wrapping up slides. I think the overall approach is no different. If you look at back in the day, they were propagating, you see scanning going on, they're all the same things we've seen for years. Applications have always been targeted for years. Since '98, when we saw the first SQL injection attack, we're still seeing it today. Nothing's changed. The developers are still having the same challenges with making sure that they solve those problems. But one of the things that has changed is gone away from this approach of the old school smash and grab, steal the data, to stealthy. I want to be as quiet as possible, stay in the environment for as long as I can, siphon as much data up as I can, or make as much money through cryptocurrency mining as I can, where possible. We can't just rely on security alerts, we kind of have to understand the threat, and unfortunately it still ends up landing on people. Because no matter how smart your technology are, you still need somebody to look at it and understand what the hell it's telling you before you can get to the end of it. So here's our top 10 tips. Think about proactive hardening. So if you see something strange going on, look at if it could be successful. If it is, harden it as quickly as you can. Gather the right metadata. What I mean by that is all the other evidence around it. A lot of security products miss that. They don't have all the information you need to figure out, like what was the version of the operating system when we saw some strange activity. Do you have that information to hand? Or have you got to go and figure that out? When you're triaging incidents, it's really difficult because we have to go and say, well, what version was it on when it got hacked? I don't know. What have you done? We've patched it. Okay, so we don't know if it was vulnerable when you did that. Have you got again? No, we don't know. We haven't patched it for years. So not just these kind of alerts. Look at outcomes. What are we going to do with an alert if we get it? Often people say, I want to send you everything. I want to send you all the log data. Okay, but what are we going to do if we actually see an event from that? Don't know. Okay, well, there's no point in us logging in it if we don't know what we're going to do with it. Education, so say no to things like unsolicited emails. We saw that from back in the day. Still seeing it today. Emails having problems. Don't follow the links if you don't trust them. We've seen some interesting stuff at the moment where they're using Office 365. They're creating a form and they're using the link as a form to Office 365 to get people's credentials. So it looks really legit because it is a legit Office 365 account, but it's obviously malicious in intent. Keep stuff up to date, of course. No admin rights for users when possible. Everyday work. Should be using admin. Strong password policies, we've seen that, discourage the reuse of user passwords there, that's a really tough one to solve for people. Logs and proactive monitoring, I can't emphasise enough how important it is. And plan your incident response and test it. Because if you don't know what you're doing, when it actually happens, you make really poor decisions like delete logs or update systems, which isn't good when you're trying to investigate an incident. Conscious of time, I've probably run over quite too much. So if you have any questions, come and see us at the stand. Come and grab a grenade, stress ball. Just don't leave them on the underground, because I will be the one that will get in trouble for it. Thanks very much for listening to my talk.